declaration, I think that at least it provides a foundation for us to come back to the table and start to talk about where maybe we disagree on a couple of priorities. But at 1.5 trillion, it's certainly higher than the number we had. But it's not a showstopper at this point. And just want to applaud the work of the Problem Solvers Caucus of staying engaged. And if the Speaker is serious about staying in until we get a deal, let's start the negotiations back and hopefully help those people that are hurting the most during this pandemic.
Yeah, let's talk about priorities, which you mentioned. State and local aid at $500 billion kind of splits 195 from the White House, 915 from the House. Is state and local aid the #1 priority, or is it more about industry aid, direct checks, or something else?
Well, I think the #1 priority for the president has been more the direct stimulus and help to those that are hurting, whether it's either direct checks or an expanded PPP program that helps small businesses, making sure that enhanced unemployment is there for those who are still without a job. Those are the top priorities. But when we look at state and local, that has been a major stumbling block for us. Still at $500 billion, I would say that is more than what we're seeing in terms of lost revenues. I'm not saying that they may have to look at their proposed budgets, but if we're talking about trying to replace some of the lost revenues, hopefully that number is closer to the $250 to $300 billion range. But again, if we're there negotiating between those guardrails that the Problem Solvers Caucus has put forth, at least it gives us something to talk about, and I'm encouraged.
Specifically, new money for documented state general revenue shortfalls. I believe it is $250 billion. Now, that's of the $500 billion in total for state and local aid. So, again, I guess just to get even more specific, is that $250 billion for those revenue shortfalls something you think is commensurate with sort of where you might be?
Well, we've looked at the revenue shortfalls, and we've estimated both state and local to be around $250 to $275 billion. As you recall, in the previous CARES Act, we put forth $150 billion, of which there's still over $100 billion of that waiting to be deployed. And so as we look at a combination of those, certainly I'm going to leave it up to the senators and the House members to find that sweet spot. But I can tell you the president has been very clear. If we're looking at real needs and real lost revenue, he's willing to consider it. What he's not willing to consider is really a bailout of pension funds and poorly run budgets across states that they're using this pandemic as a way to supplement that. So as long as it's something that is real and that it is part of what this economy caused when it was shut down artificially, then we're certainly willing to look at it.
Mr. Meadows, you know, it's funny, just listening to you. I mean, we've had, obviously, Speaker Pelosi. We've had Treasury Secretary Mnuchin. We've had Majority Leader McConnell, on, and you. This is more optimistic than I can remember somebody being in terms of the possibility of getting towards a deal, at least in a couple of months. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm probably more optimistic about the potential for a deal in the last 72 hours than I have been in the last 72 days. And it's really a key and a clarifying point that you put forth that I think is accurate, that if we're actually willing to engage, what keeps us apart is smaller than perhaps what the headlines have been. So much of it's been focused on a $2.2 or $2.4 trillion number and a $1.3 trillion number. This proposal actually gives us some real specifics to talk about. And the other thing, if the Speaker is willing to stay in, I'm willing to stay in, the Secretary is willing to stay in, and ultimately the President has encouraged us that if they're really wanting a deal, that he's willing to make a deal.
Finally, Mark, I wonder, you know, retail sales came in this morning for August. It was a little bit lighter than we thought, but it was up 4 months in a row. And that's, of course, including a period where those enhanced benefits had expired. There's still a school of thought that says this is not necessary. Households have built up a lot of savings. The banks have been pretty optimistic this week. Is there any reason to think the White House would argue this is the last deal? If we're going to get a deal, this is it?
Well, I think what we have is some very encouraging numbers, both economically and really as we start to look. And you just mentioned a number of those indicators that our economists and certainly Secretary Mnuchin are tracking very closely. At the same time, I don't think that there is any belief that we're totally out of some of the concerns on small businesses, the airlines, and others that would allow us to look the other way. So if there's going to be a deal that actually helps us make a soft landing, I think that deal has to happen in the next week to 10 days. And if we get that deal, then hopefully it is targeted towards those that are still struggling or have the potential to struggle in this latter part of the third and fourth quarters.